your money. Otherwise, your algebra.
Don't you mean history?
Don't change the subject.
Hey guys, and welcome back. My name is Miss Danielson, and today we're having another lesson on changing the subject, but this lesson will be at a slightly higher level. This is looking at GCSE or higher GCSE type questions, which may involve equations with a variable on both sides of the equation, as well as different ways to deal with brackets in an equation, sorting out algebraic fractions, and some factorizing. So if you're not familiar with factorizing, please check the description box down below. I'll link some videos for you there. Let's get started. In all of these examples, I want to get x as the subject. Let me just first make that clear. So I want to get x as a subject. It's inside the brackets. The easiest way to get rid of these brackets is to expand it out. So multiply it out. 3 times 2x and 3 times 7b. So first step, that gives me 6x, right? 3 times 2. And 21b, because I did 3 times the 7b. Right? And now I just need to get x on its own, and it should be pretty straightforward from here. I need to send the 21b across, so that leaves me with 6x equals 3b minus 21b. Simplifying that, 3b take away 21b is going to be negative 18b. And I've taken the 6 across in the same step. So it was times 6. I've taken the 6 across, I divided by 6. And don't think that you're done just because you got the x on its own. Remember to check if you can simplify that at all. And I can simplify this fraction. I can divide both top and bottom by 6, which means that x is equal to negative 3b. If you put negative 3b over 1, mathematically that's correct, but it's not algebraically simplified. So it's negative 3b. Here's another example. It's also got brackets, but this time my subject's on the outside. Remember, I always want to make x the subject of these examples. You'll have to read the question carefully to see what the subject's supposed to be, but in these examples, x is the subject. So I want to get the x by itself. I don't want to multiply the x into these brackets, because then I'm going to end up with two different x terms, which I'll then later have to group together and try and get x on its own again. So since the x is outside, I will move the whole bracket to the other side and leave the 3x by itself. So there, I've got 3x on its own. I've moved this full bracket, which was being multiplied by the 3x. So now it's over here getting divided. And then to get x on its own, I got rid of the 3. I divided by 3. So here I've put my divide by 3. Now this is a trick that you should be using. You can write divide by 3 here, but you should know that that simplifies like this. If you're going to divide a fraction by a whole number, you can write it as divide that fraction by 3 over 1, because 3 divided by 1 is the same thing as 3, but we know how to divide by fractions. A fraction divided by a fraction, we flip the second fraction over and we multiply, right? Because multiplying by a third is the same thing as dividing by 3. So here I'm multiplying this fraction by 1/3. The tops of the fractions get multiplied together, so the top just gets multiplied by 1, the value doesn't change, and the bottoms get multiplied together. The bottom's getting multiplied by 3. So I would then have to simplify my fraction, see if I could factor anything out of the top and the bottom, and here I see that I can. I could divide both those terms by 4, so I factored the 4 out. And that left me with 1, because 4 times 1 would make the 4, and minus 2y, because 4 times minus 2y would make the minus 8y. And I noticed that my brackets on the top and on the bottom are the same. I can divide both top and bottom by 1 minus 2y. If I do that, x ends up being 4 over 3, or just 1.3 recurring. So again, when I got the x on its own here, don't think that you're done. Always check, can I do anything more? Can I simplify this anymore? And simplifying a fraction, look for a common factor. Find a common factor, you should factorize both the top and the bottom if you can. Okay, next one. Here we're dealing with fractions where I'm starting you out with a pair of fractions. Always multiply the bottom across, because a fraction is a division. X is being divided by 2b. So if I take the 2b to the other side, I will multiply it on the other side. So I've got x is equal to 3b over 4 times 2b. Now if I'm multiplying a fraction by a whole number, it's only the top that gets multiplied, because remember our last example, 2b is the same thing as 2b over 1. So if I'd written that as a fraction of 2b over 1, and then I multiply the tops together, I would get 3b times 2b, and I multiply the bottom together, I would just have 4 times 1, so the bottom will not change. I've got 3b times 2b on the top, and 4 stays the same on the bottom. That is 6b squared. X is equal to 6b squared over 4. Now again, I've got x on its own here, but let's see if we can simplify this at all. There is a common factor I can divide both top and bottom by, and that common factor is 2. 6 divides by 2, and 4 divides by 2, so that's going to be 3b squared over 2. Next one, I've got another fraction, but this time I've got a fraction where I've got x on the bottom of this one and x on the bottom of that one. It's not just a matter of sending the denominator across and then I have my x on its own, but I will always still start the same way. Regardless of what's on the bottom, always multiply the bottom across. Okay, so I'm going to start by sending this 2x across to this side. That leaves me with 3a on that side. Don't worry that it's getting too confused here with all of your x's. That's what you need to do to get rid of your fractions. We've got 3a is equal to this, and we know that a fraction multiplied by something, we only multiply the top. So I've got 3a is equal to 7 times the 2x is 14x over 2 plus x. This is like 2x over 1. If I multiplied 1 by that, it stays the same. Okay. Next, I want to break up this fraction. This fraction is really confusing for me to work with, so I'll take the bottom of the fraction to the other side and multiply. Always multiply the bottom across. That's the best way to deal with equations with fractions in them. Okay? So I've taken the bottom across and I'm multiplying by it. I kept it in brackets because the whole thing was dividing the 14x. So the whole thing is coming across together and multiplying by the 3a. And I can go ahead and expand that out, multiply it through. So that's going to give me 6a plus 3ax, right, equals 14x. Now remember, I want to make x the subject, and I've got an x term over here and an x term over there. So I'm going to get them together. I'm going to move this x term over here so that I have all the x terms over here, and I'll send everything else over there. Right? It was plus 3ax, now it's minus 3ax. Still, I've got two terms with x in them, and I can't group them together. If this had just been 3x, then I could do 14 minus 3 and have some number of x, but because it's 3ax, I cannot group them. But what I can do is see the common factor of these two terms is x. I can pull the x out, I can factor it out. So I put the x out front, and I've written inside the brackets 14 because x times 14 would make the 14x. And inside the brackets I've got minus 3a because x times minus 3a would make minus 3ax. And now, I don't know if you've noticed how close we are to the answer. A lot of people stop here and they don't know what to do next. I've almost got x on its own. I just need to move that bracket to the other side. X is multiplying by it, so I'll divide by it. And there we have it. Now, looking at what you've got left here, I'm just going to check if I can simplify. Can I divide the top by anything I can divide the bottom by? I can divide the top by 2, 3, 6, and a. I could divide the bottom by only 1. Right? I cannot divide both top and bottom by a because this term here, we cannot factor a out of there. So that's it. It's simplified. It's done. Okay. Again, I've got fractions, but I've written this fraction out front this time. Whenever you've got a fraction times some value, though, just remember when you multiply them, we just multiply the top. So it's going to be 3 root x over 2b equals 3b over 8. And then we're going to work this through the same way as before. Feel free to hit pause now and give it a try for yourself. I've got fractions here. I always multiply the bottoms across. So give it a go. I'm going to keep going. I'm multiplying the bottom across. So I've got 2b, take it to the other side and multiply it. Right? I've got a fraction times a whole number. So I'm only going to multiply the top of that fraction. So I'm doing 3b times the 2b. And I'll put that answer over 8. 3b times 2b is 3 times 2 is the 6. Don't forget that b times b makes the b squared though. Okay, so I've got 6b squared over 8, and over here I've got 3 root x. I've got a fraction here. I don't particularly like working with fractions, but I've almost got the x on its own. So rather than moving the 8 across here, I'm going to take my 3 across here, and then I've almost got my x on its own. The 3 there is multiplying, so I'm going to divide. Right? Notice that my 3 is just shown up here on the bottom. If I were to do this divided by 3, what I would end up having to do is write 3 over 1 and flip it over, multiply it. So I'm multiplying the 3 on the bottom and the 1 on the top. So I skipped that step. I just showed that to divide by 3, I need to multiply the denominator by 3. Okay, so that's going to be 6b squared over 24. And I want the x completely on its own. I need to get rid of that square root sign. So I'm going to need to do the opposite of square root, which is squaring. But before I do that, to make these numbers a little bit easier to work with, notice that I can simplify this. The top divides by 6 and the bottom divides by 6. That's going to give me b squared over 4. And now let's get rid of that square root sign. So opposite of square root is squaring. I am squaring everything on this side though, so I put it inside brackets. And really good habit to get into is when you square something, don't just go ahead and square it, but write it out twice. So x is equal to b squared over 4 times b squared over 4, bracket times bracket. I've got a fraction multiplied by a fraction. The tops get multiplied together. B squared times b squared is b to the power of 4. And the bottoms get multiplied together. 4 times 4 is 16. Now you might have been able to do that directly from here. Using laws of indices, you see b to the power of 2 to the power of 2. Those multiply together, they give us 4. But I want to make sure that you're also going to square the bottom. 4 squared is 16. Okay? Right, moving on. This one, you need to get your variables together and then get them alone. You see I got x's on both sides of this equation. I want to get those x's together, and our rule is generally to move the smaller x term. Now, negative x terms are definitely smaller than positive x terms. And remember, the reason we do this is try to keep things positive if possible. So I'm going to move the 4x over to the other side. And at the same time, I've moved my 3b over to this side. So I end up with 2x plus this 4x and b minus the 3b. That can be simplified. This isn't a particularly difficult question, so if you want to try and do it on your own, hit pause and do it for yourself. Continuing along though, I've got 6x, because 2x plus 4x, equals negative 2b. b minus 3b is negative 2b. Get the x on its own, 10 the 6 across. That's going to be divided by 6. Again, I've got my x on its own, but check to make sure that this is simplified. I can still simplify it. I can divide both top and bottom by 2, and that gives me negative b over 3. Okay, let's try a slightly harder one now. So again, this is get your variables together and then get it alone. But this time we may require factorizing out the subject. When there's more than one x term and you can't group those terms together, you'll need to factor the x out. So I've got brackets here, and the x, the subject that I want on its own, is inside the bracket. So the easiest thing for me to do would be to multiply those brackets through. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply them both through. I've got 2x plus 6, and 5b times 5 is 5b. b times negative 4x is negative 4bx. And I want to get my x's together now, and the numbers to the other side. So I've got here 2x, and I've got minus 4bx. Doesn't really matter which way you move them, but I kind of want to keep things positive, so I think the best thing to do would be to move this one over to that side and make it plus. So I've got 2x plus 4bx. And in the same step, I've taken this plus 6 over to the other side and I made it minus 6, coming after the 5b that was already there. Right, now I've got two terms, both of them have x in it, but I cannot group them together. If that b weren't there, I could say that that's 2x plus 4x is 6x. With that b there, they are not like terms. I can't group them together. The way I can get x on its own, though, is by factoring it out. Both of those terms can be divided by x, so let's take the x out. Now, inside the brackets, just checking, x times 2 would make the 2x, x times 4b would make the 4bx. On the other side, I haven't changed a thing. I want the x by itself, so I can move the bracket to the other side, right? Whenever we've got brackets and the value we want on its own is outside the brackets, move the bracket to the other side and divide. And there we have it. I'm just going to double check if I can simplify this at all. 5b and minus 6 do not have a common factor other than 1, so that's not going to get factorized. The bottom, I could factor out the 2. I could write that as 2 brackets, and then inside the brackets 1 plus 2b, but that's not going to simplify from what's above, so I can just leave it as it is. So that's it. Hopefully those examples will help you get a good start, and let me know if you need any other help.